headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
So the online safety bill is going through the House of Commons today. Let's talk to Brendan O'Neill, who has more or less been covering this from the very beginning and has got plenty to say about it. Brendan, very good afternoon. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you.
Thank you, Mike.
Very nice to see you. Now, the online safety bill, it feels like we've been talking about this for ages and ages and ages. Is it finally actually going to be passed into law?
Sadly, it looks like that's going to happen at some point. And it's a bill, in my view, that everyone should be worried about, because this is a bill which will bring in huge restrictions on the internet. The headline news is that it will force big tech companies to take down illegal content, or else they could be fined an awful lot of money. And now, to most people, that will sound like a reasonable thing to do. You know, we don't want terrorist videos on the internet. You certainly don't want child pornography and genuinely illegal stuff like that. But it looks like lots of other stuff is going to get swept up as well, including so-called harmful content. And my concern is, who gets to define what is harmful? Who gets to decide what kind of words or images could potentially harm someone who's using the web? You know, if that's going to be defined by a censorious bureaucrat in Whitehall, then we're in trouble, because it will no longer be a free space for us to have discussions.
No, exactly right. And there's quite a few kind of what you might call inconsistencies, at the very least, aren't there, with some of the rules that Facebook seems to operate?
Oh, complete inconsistency. So the most notorious one of the past few days is that Facebook, Meta, the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, has basically just changed its rules to allow people in certain countries to say violent things about Russian military forces and potentially even about Russian politicians. So it's relaxed its hate speech rules in various countries, Ukraine and Russia themselves, and also other countries in that region. And it's allowing its users to say things like "death to the Russians." And these are the kinds of platforms which will ban a feminist for life if she refers to someone with a penis as he when he identifies as a woman. This is the kind of platform that banned Donald Trump, essentially for saying "I love you" to a bunch of protesters outside the Capitol in January 2021. So this is a really censorious platform which has now given people license to say hateful and violent things. And I think that really demonstrates the hypocrisy of Silicon Valley, but also the power that they have to determine even who we're allowed to hate when we're on the internet. And that's quite chilling and Orwellian.
Well, it really is, because we now live, do we not, Brendan, in this kind of obscure world where, you know, when you walk anywhere in London, all you see is blue and yellow. All you see is the Ukrainian colours. You know, I walked past the festival hall the other night and that was all emblazoned with blue and yellow. People are wearing blue and yellow clothes. People are wearing little badges. You know, it's kind of like, you know, if you're not with Ukraine, there's something wrong with you. And you kind of go, well, what if I'm not actually with anybody? What if I'm just observing it from afar? You wrote about the Ukrainian ambassador to Austria this week, Alexander Scherber, who said everywhere he goes, he gets the feeling that people in the West want him to give up and basically stop the war, despite the fact that they're seemingly doing quite well resisting the Russians.
Yeah, well, I'm currently wearing a blue and yellow ribbon, Mike.
Well, there you go. For heaven's sake, I assumed that was something to do with St. Patrick's Day. What happened to the shamrock?
I know, I had to choose between my St. Patrick's Day badge or my Ukraine badge. I never wear ribbons, and I used to write articles saying how much I loathe people who decorate themselves from head to toe in ribbons and bracelets. You know, basically virtue signaling fashion. They put on all the ribbons to say, look, I'm a good person. But I found myself doing it this time because I do support Ukraine, but I completely agree with you. The idea that people should be pressured into supporting Ukraine when they might not care very much.
But that's what I mean. You know, it doesn't mean if I'm not wearing one that I'm some kind of fascist that believes the Russian jackboot should crush the Ukrainians under its soul, you know?
Exactly. And, you know, you mentioned there the former Ukrainian ambassador to Austria. And I think Alexander Scherber, I think he made a very good point, which is that every time he talks to the Western media now, he gets the impression that really the Western media wants Ukraine to give up, to negotiate with Russia, to stop this horrible war. We all agree it's a horrible war. And basically to bring peace, even if it's not really the kind of deal that Ukraine wants. And I think he's right. He's spotted a kind of moral defeatism, I think, in the West, where on the one one hand, you have what you've just described, which is this kind of slightly shallow flag waving, we love Ukraine kind of social media stuff. But on the other side, you have this slightly cowardly belief that, you know, it should all just come to an end and Ukraine should stop doing what it's doing. And isn't it just dreadful? But the thing is, lots and lots of Ukrainian people have decided that their freedom and their sovereignty are worth fighting for.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really alien to some people here in the UK. We don't really believe there's much worth fighting for anymore. And we live in a country in which the chattering classes in particular don't believe in national sovereignty at all. We saw that around Brexit. So they're slightly bamboozled, I think, that the Ukrainian people are putting their lives on the line for their national freedom.
Well, that is the thing, isn't it? As we saw, as you quite rightly point out, during the Brexit sort of referendum period and during the arguments that were all being had, the people who wanted to remain as part of the European Union, by and large, didn't understand what nationalism even is. You know, they thought it was something rather grubby, something that sort of racists talked about. People who wave the flag are somehow called, you know, something that we can't really say here on Talk Radio during the daytime. You know, they give them names which would suggest that being proud of a union flag is something dirty and horrible and nasty.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a staggering hypocrisy among some of those kinds of people in the chattering classes who are currently cheering on Ukraine in a fairly shallow way. These are the same kinds of people who were part of the Remainer elite who spent the past 6 years saying that you're racist if you wave the UK flag, you're an idiot if you talk about national identity, you know, grow up, national identity doesn't matter anymore. If you believe in national sovereignty, you're basically a xenophobe, you just want to close the borders and keep all foreigners out. That's what they were saying for the last 6 years. And now the same people are cheering on Ukrainians for doing what? For waving their national flag, for talking about their national identity, and for fighting for their national sovereignty. So we haven't forgotten what those people said, those members of the political class. We haven't forgotten what they said during Brexit. We haven't forgotten that they called everyone who had a flag on their front door a racist. We haven't forgotten that they said anyone who cares for borders and nationhood is basically a political Neanderthal and needs to get with the times. That's what they said. And so the idea that they are genuinely on the side of the Ukrainian people who are fighting to preserve their borders and their national sovereignty, it just sounds like a bit of a sick joke to me.
Well, it really does. Hypocrisy is very much the order of the day, isn't it? Because the thing that also strikes me as a bit odd is the fact that those who are kind of, say, siding against Ukraine, if you like, or saying that Ukraine is you know, a failed state and it's been somehow invaded by the dreaded Americans and it's been corrupted by years and years and years of American money and the Biden family and all the rest of it, they seem to come from both sides of the extreme. So you've got sort of extreme lefties and extreme righties, both sort of pushing that particular line. And it seems bizarre to me that it's capturing both sides of that sort of divide.
Absolutely right. I've noticed the same thing. And the way I see it is, look, it's pretty clear at the moment. An independent nation has been aggressively invaded by its powerful neighbor. And whose side are we going to be on? I'm on the side of the Ukrainian people. It's not complicated to me at all.
Not really.
But I think you're right. There's a lot of anti-Ukraine sentiment among some people on the right. I've seen some of it on social media. I've seen it even on Instagram. I only use Instagram, and I've seen it there as well. You know, it's a corrupt country. It's an oligarchical country. Zelensky's not what he's made out to be. He's a bit censorious. He's not very open-minded. He's banned political parties. Now, all of this actually is true. You know, Ukraine is not a perfect country. It's not a perfect democracy, but neither is Britain. Britain is not a perfect democracy either. We have oligarchs in this country, British oligarchs. We have people who can use their money to influence politics. We saw that during Brexit as well with the very well-funded Remain campaign. We have an imperfect democracy. We have an unelected second chamber. We have people who are allowed to amend laws without having been elected into power, and so on and so on. If we were to be invaded by Russia, would these people sit back and say, well, we're not a very good country, we're not very democratic, so get on with it, we probably deserve it? I hope they wouldn't. And that's what I'm thinking in relation to Ukraine. It's an imperfect, very young democracy, but it has every right to defend itself against Russian aggression.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And no matter what may have gone before, no matter what people hark back to in 2014 and what accusations are made, there is only one aggressor in this particular situation. It happens to be the Russian military. And that's the end of it, really, isn't it?
That's it. That's for me. That's the story right now, and that's why I think we should support the Ukrainian people. They're doing something incredibly brave. These are people who've gone overnight from being school teachers or bus drivers to being on the front line against the fourth largest military force in the world. That's an incredibly brave thing to have done, and I think we should support them in that. And the thing that worries me is this culture of defeatism. I think you see it in relation to Ukraine, where people are like, oh, I hope it just stops. I hope it comes to an end soon. But you also see it in the culture here in the UK as well. We've got the Ministry of Defence, which was tweeting about pansexuality in the week that Ukraine was invaded by Russia. You had the head of MI6, who, by the way, is he, him. He's got his pronouns in his biography on Twitter. He was tweeting about the importance of LGBTQI, whatever.
It's unbelievable, that, isn't it? I mean, in the midst of what you would hope, and I said this actually yesterday, that you would hope that somewhere inside of Moscow there are some intelligence service agents who are actually trying to destabilise Vladimir Putin and possibly look for a successor that can run Russia in a slightly less violent way. But no, instead, what he's tweeting about is how great it is that we've got LGBTQ rights because that's what makes us different from Russia. Well, we're also not invading Ukraine. That also makes us different from Russia,
And then you've got people in the British Army campaigning for the right to wear vegan uniforms because imagine being asked to wear a dead animal when your job is to kill a human being. It's ridiculous. But the culture in our country, sadly, is one of fragility at the moment. It's very much, we encourage young people to be offended by words, to feel erased and to feel sad if they see a statue of an old person who didn't have the same views as us. We encourage them to go into safe spaces to hide away from offensive ideas. And we have cultivated a fragile generation. And the thing that concerns me is if we were to be invaded, which I know is very unlikely, where would the armies of young people be who are strong enough and committed enough to the nation to fight back? And Ukraine clearly has those young people. I don't think we do.
No, I think given what we know about the old informers that were sort of growing up through the COVID pandemic, we might get a bit more of that. You might get people shopping their neighbours for being anti the invasion, and suddenly tipping off the invading force that you might want to go and kill the neighbours next door.
Yeah, the snitch culture, which we saw, as you say, during COVID, the curtain twitchers who were squealing on their neighbours if they went for 2 jogs a day rather than 1 jog, but also the whole cancel culture. That's all about a kind of finger pointing culture and trying to cancel people and erase them from public life if they have the incorrect views or if they don't fully support the cult of transgenderism or whatever else it might be. The point is that this kind of culture that we have in Britain in the 21st century, which is a fragile culture, which is a culture which is very censorious, very vulnerable, which doesn't like controversy, doesn't like the idea of masculinity. Masculinity is toxic, apparently, which doesn't like the idea of patriotism or loyalty. Apparently, that's racist. A country that has ditched all of those values and the warrior ethos, too. It's also ditched the warrior ethos. That's not a country that is going to be able to stand up for itself on the world stage. No. And I think that's the kind of discussion we need to have alongside how can we support Ukraine. We need to ask, how would we fare in this kind of situation? And how can we strengthen our democracy and strengthen our young people so that they're able to defend this country?
And you'd like to think, although I'm not certain that we can with any great sort of authority or confidence think it, that the whole net zero nonsense will now finally be kind of dispatched into the dustbin of history, because that's how we kind of got here as well.
Oh, it's absolutely crazy. If I see one more middle-class left-wing person saying, oh, isn't the energy thing terrible? I'm going to, grab them by the scruff of their neck, because these are the kinds of people who campaigned against fracking, which we no longer do in this country, who go mental every time the government tries to open a coal-fired station or, never mind, a nuclear power station. They've been campaigning for a long time to depict energy as a terrible, evil thing. And as a result, we've done less and less domestic energy production, and we've outsourced a lot of our energy production to China or Russia and other countries. And that's a real problem. We now need to get to a situation where we are energy self-sufficient. And the only way we can do that is by doing all the things that these people don't like. Fracking for shale gas, investing seriously in nuclear power, having coal-fired stations for backup when everything else doesn't work. We need to get serious about providing the 67 million people in this country with enough cheap, abundant energy to heat their homes and to have nice lives. And we've got to get rid of the net zero ideology and, I would say, the green ideology more broadly, which I think is a very unaspirational, limited and depressing way of viewing the world.
Absolutely right. Now, I've got to ask you this, Brendan, given that you're wearing the blue and yellow colours of Ukraine, are you going to be taking one of the refugees or one of the families that are coming over?
I'm not, sadly. I just haven't got the capacity to do so. I think it's good that some people are doing it. But you know what? I wish they would stop advertising that fact online all the time. I can't remember who said it, but someone decades ago once said that charity that is performed in the public eye is no longer charity. It becomes more like, self-promotion. I think there's a lot of that going on. Aren't I a great person? I'm taking in a refugee. It is a good thing to do. People do need our help, and I admire the people I know someone who is doing it, and I admire those people, but you don't have to get a megaphone and stand on a rooftop and tell the world what you're doing. Get on with it, do your duty, and, stay quiet.
I mean, I just don't believe there's 100,000 people that want to do it. I think there's 100,000 people that want to be seen to be wanting to do it, which is an entirely different thing.
Yeah, well, we will soon find out, I think, whether people are doing it and where these people are going and whether they're living comfortably. I think it's good that the government are supporting people and giving money to the individuals who bring.
Well, I don't think it is. I think that's ridiculous. That's my money they're giving away.
Well, the problem, I think, is the question of whether it would be a possible operation if that kind of investment weren't being made. And we don't know because it wasn't tried prior to that promise being made by the government. But I think there will be some people out there who will want to help a refugee but might not have the resources to do it, and it could be helpful for them. Of course, there will also be people out there who do have the resources, who can easily afford it, and they're likely to be the ones who are online all the time saying, I'm taking a refugee, aren't I a great person? So there's a mix of different kind of emotions and virtue signals and politics involved in all of this. I just hope that as a democratic country which is being friendly towards Ukraine, we can do them a good service of giving them somewhere to stay for a few years while Russia is destroying their country, and help them in any way that we can. Yeah,
I think that's a very fine sentiment. Brendan, thank you very much indeed. Brendan O'Neill there talking to us about his attitude to Ukraine, but also about the West's attitude in general.
Good talk. Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio. Listen on your smart speaker. Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk radio.